All right, welcome to Hot Route Takes. Today we are going to do our AFC South and NFC South rankings. We had some technical difficulties last week trying to make this pod, and so here we are. This is our third attempt making this pod, and hopefully everything goes smooth this time around. We are all hoping that at least. But before we dive into the pod, I wanted to mention a couple things. We have some social media set up, and it's been running. Our YouTube account, Hot Route Takes, is up, and we have been recording each pod and posting it there. Thank everyone for the support, especially on TikTok. We've received a good amount of support and views. And our TikTok is Hot Route Takes as well. Pretty easy to find us. Without further ado, I'll jump into this thing. And I guess we'll start with the NFC South or the AFC South. I'll just give their rankings and how they finished the division last year real quick before we jump in. And the Jaguars won the division with a 9-8 record, went into the playoffs and faced Christian's Chargers. The Titans finished second in the division at 7-10. Colts third, 4-12-1. Texans last, 3-13-1. And we all know the Texans had a real early pick, and so did the Colts, and they took two new rookie quarterbacks to be the face of their franchise, and we'll see how both of those guys turn out. But I believe Christian and Chase both went first on giving their pick on the last couple pods, and so I'll go first today. We're doing the AFC South, so my fourth team is the Indianapolis Colts, and the reason why is just because there's not a whole lot of star power in this team. I think in general they're a little slim across the roster. They don't got a whole lot of depth in certain areas, linebacker, and across the offensive line. But not just that, they just don't have a whole lot of real playmakers and proven players in critical positions like a left tackle and quarterback, a corner, and edge rusher. They've invested plenty in the edge group, but no one's really popped yet. And just in general, lack of just big names. Got Michael Pittman in the receiver room, Jonathan Taylor, good player, but he might be on the outs. And we all know the front office has kind of had their fair share of woes in recent memory. The hiring of Jeff Saturday will always make me scratch my head. But yeah, man, just a little bit of a team that just needs to rebuild and retool a little bit. I don't think they're in for a good season next year.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brian. The Colts are my fourth team and the bottom in the basement of the AFC South for me as well. I think the rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson is going to have the most growing pain and the biggest learning curve out of all the rookie QBs, just because of what a project he is. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. We've talked of this before. I'm just happy the Colts finally picked a direction and drafted a young rookie quarterback instead of just putting their cards on these aging QBs that just kind of left them in the middle ground going to nowhere. So it's exciting for their franchise to see this direction and hopefully some steps taken by Anthony Richardson this year. But everything else is such a question mark, and it's as you mentioned, the front office and all those things. Their best player, Jonathan Taylor, may not even be playing for them this year. With that situation such up in the air, it just leaves a lot to be desired from a roster standpoint with that question mark on. So for that reason, I have them finishing last and having another high draft pick, and hopefully they use that to beef up the defensive side a little bit and find some core players on that side of the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go a different way. I got Houston Texans at 4. I just think, new coach, a lot of young guys. I think still have a lot of coaching to do in Houston. I mean, we seen with Deshaun a couple years ago how good he was at quarterback and 4,000 plus passing yards. They only won 4 games. I don't think C.J. Stroud is anywhere close to carrying a team like Deshaun tried to do, and I mean, he only got 4 wins. And I just think that team back then is better than what they have now. I mean, other than John Mechie, Tank Dell, I mean, I'm not really impressed with the wide receiver room. I think they do have good corners. They went and got Shaquille Griffin, Jimmy Ward, who's already played with this head coach when he was with the 49ers, and they still have a young Derek Stingley. So I think that's a positive that they have 3 guys that are kind of like they're set in stone pieces. But I mean, I've kind of seen C.J. Stroud since he's been in the preseason a little bit. We've seen That first showing of him wasn't too impressive, and I seen a little bit of the week 2, but I just think he still has a lot to learn just because the Ohio State offense is so power heavy with their wide receivers. So I'm kind of scared that maybe CJ Stroud's going to be throwing a good many number of picks just by staring down that number 1 read so much. But it's a young team, so they make him surprise people, but I just don't see it happening. So I have him at 4.
I got you. I'm a little bit higher on Houston than you are, Christian. I got them at 3, and I kind of tiered out these teams. I had tier 1, and then tier 2 was the second and third team, and then I had a clear third tier and the Indianapolis Colts. But I do like Houston a little bit more. I think they just got a couple more young players across the roster that are just ready and poised to break out. One name in particular, Jalen Petrie, the safety. He's had a great camp, and he looked good last year. I know when they played Miami, he gave us a little bit of some fits, but they also got Derek Stingley, as Christian talked about. They got some young guys across the defensive line, Jonathan Grenard, Will Anderson, who's their top pick. And then, offensively, CJ Stroud, young player, and they got this offensive line in front of them that's actually pretty good with Laramie Tunsil, Kenyon Green, Shaq Mason at right guard, and then the right tackle, unfortunately, Titus Howard actually broke his hand in preseason, so he's going to miss some time, which sucks. And then the weapons are kind of so-so, I think, is a good word to put it. But they brought in a lot of pieces here. Dalton Schultz is a pretty good tight end to have for a young quarterback to be able to lean on, have that security blanket. But also, having a running game to support your young quarterback is important. And they got some backs in here, and Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce, yes.
Yeah.
Who was actually very good last year. And I'm excited to see what that offense looks like next year. But lots of young players on this Houston team. They're still rebuilding, but I can definitely see some players making some taking some steps and being in a better place next year, for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brian. I've got Houston at 3 as well. And really what you touched on, the foundational pieces on the defensive side of the ball, I like a little more, and I like that direction more than Indy. And then the D'Amico Ryan hire just seems like the perfect fit for these guys.
For sure.
I'm excited for the secondary, as you touched on. Petrie had a nice rookie year, and Stingley looked pretty good in certain schemes last year. So I'm interested to see what D'Amico can scheme up with those guys. It's the run defense that was a big problem last year. Teams just got ahead and ran it down their throats. They gave up the most rushing yards all of football last year, just over 2,800. So they got behind, couldn't stop the run. Not a big recipe for a lot of wins, as you saw. But That being said, I think they'll score more points with CJ taking the snaps instead of Davis Mills. Yeah, I think they'll put up a few more points, like you said. They have something to be excited about on that side of the ball this year. But as I said, the defense, Will Anderson may be the most intriguing and the biggest prospect I'm anticipating to watch this year on defense. So I just think they'll hold their own enough to win more games than Indy next year on that side of the ball.
Yep, I do agree. Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins, their interior duo there, they didn't do a whole lot to shore up this run defense, but they should be able to get after the passer from the interior a decent bit, though, with those guys. But probably not going to get a whole lot of run defense out of them. So We'll see what that looks like going forward, though.
Yeah, at 3, I have the Tennessee Titans. I just think other than DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not impressed with anybody in the receiving room. And then you've seen Taylor Lewan pretty much busting with the boys full time, I guess, at this point. I mean, he said he's still trying to get signed by a team, but I ain't heard nothing else on Taylor Lewan at this point. Then they also lose Ben Jones. It's been another piece for them for like a decade with Taylor Lewan. And this team that's just a run-heavy team, I just don't see you losing 2 guys like that. It's going to be a benefit for your offense at all. And definitely with Derrick Henry being what I'm expecting to be another workhorse for this team to be able to win. And also, I mean, last season they did start 7-3. I think a lot of people were impressed with that, thought they maybe were going somewhere, and then they ended up losing 7 in a row. So I just think they got a new OC, Tim Kelly. He's also been a part of this team, so I don't expect anything to really change offensively with this team. They do have a great run defense, and other than going to get Sean Murphy Bunting to help with the corner room, they really didn't do anything else to really help the secondary. and that's kind of been a problem for them already. So I just think with a good run defense and how Jacksonville's kind of a pass-heavy team, and with Houston now getting C.J. Stroud, the only team left in this division that's kind of run-heavy is the Colts. So, I mean, I don't know. Tennessee is kind of what I guess y'all are both saying about the Colts. They're kind of not ready to be the quarterback kerosene team, but it looks like that's kind of in their future with them keep drafting quarterbacks. So, and I just think Caleb Farley is another guy they drafted out of Virginia. I'm big on the guy. I thought he was going to do something, but just hadn't hit the field at all with them. So that's just how I feel about Tennessee at this point.
Hot take for sure. Hot take for sure. Is it me?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right, gotcha. So my second team is Tennessee. I do believe in them a little bit more just because there's still a lot of name recognition, at least across this team, with Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins, Jeffrey Simmons. Definitely guys that still got something in the tank. And if they stay healthy, this team can potentially make a run. But I do really think that it ultimately boils down to what Ryan Tannehill can provide this year and how healthy he can stay, which, ultimately comes down to the offensive line being at least serviceable. And I think they might be able to get it there because they do have really good coaching over there, Mike Vrabel and company. But Tannehill's got to be consistent. He's got to be that reliable hand for DeAndre Hopkins. And Derrick Henry's got to be able to run the football. If that can happen, which I do see a universe in which that comes to fruition, this team could be competing for a playoff spot and pushing Jacksonville for the lead. However, you look at this team from a more than just this season. You look at it from like a just overlooking the franchise in its entirety and them going forward. It's not a pretty picture, in my opinion, at least. Because personally, I'm not very high on either of their young quarterbacks. They got a roster full of aging talent with not too many young, promising players. I know they got Traylon Burks, and I do believe he got carted off the practice field not long ago, but I'm not ultimately sure how significant that injury was. And then you got a defensive full of young players. They're kind of question marks that don't really have a whole lot of intrigue, but, not time to kind of sell them out yet. So I'm not super high on Tennessee either. I think this season could be a number of things. I think ultimately they'll probably underachieve a little bit because of just the lack of depth. But there is a possibility they can make a playoffs in my eyes at least. But also they could go the complete opposite direction and Tannehill goes down, Derrick Henry gets traded out, and they get rid of all their assets and start from ground one. That could definitely happen next year as well.
Yeah. No, we're gonna have the same rankings here, Brian, because I've got Tennessee at 2 as well. And as you spoke, for me, it's kind of by default. The other two teams are just too young to win more games than Tennessee right now, in my eyes. Yep. And the coaching alone, I think Mike Vrabel's a great coach, and he'll at least have them playing well enough on the defensive side of the ball to beat the other two teams in the division. That being said, you touched their path. It's not a direction you want to be heading. It's very mediocre, middle ground. And the D-Hop signing is such a short-term Band-Aid right now on a huge wound because the passing game was god-awful last year. They had the 4th fewest receiving yards, 2nd most punts in all of football behind the Broncos. So they just couldn't sustain drives. And that'll happen with the QB play they got, especially the second half. I like to give them a little more credit because they started off really well. They were playing good football, creating turnovers, doing what they usually do on the defensive side of the ball. And then they got hit with a rash of injuries, and Jacksonville got hot, and they just flipped sides and went opposite directions in that division. But from this year, I think they'll be a little more sound from the jump or throughout the season, and if they don't sustain those injuries, like you said, I think they flirt with playoffs contention. But if they do and they end up throwing Levis in there to see what he's got, I think that's when you're right and they go in the complete opposite direction and end up with a high draft pick. So I don't think it's exciting if you're a Tennessee fan right now. I'd rather be a Houston or a Indy and have that excitement around your franchise. But regardless, I'll have them finishing second.
Couldn't agree more, man.
Now, at second, I have the Indianapolis Colts. I just think this team's going to look totally different just on the offensive side. I think the defense, we're going to see kind of what they've been in the past, but I expect big things out of the defense this year with Leonard coming back and pretty much being the commander on the defense. It's crazy when a team lose like that piece of your middle linebacker and your guys calling in the plays, adjusting the plays. I think that's kind of what hurt the Colts a lot last year, losing a big piece like that on defense. And I just think I kind of believe in this offensive line from where they were maybe like 2 seasons ago. I just don't think all that just disappears. I understand Quentin Nelson, a lot of those guys are getting older, but with the new head coach coming in and Shane Steichen from the Eagles, I just think we're going to see a new offense, a lot of RPOs, and I think they honestly have the team for it. They have the 2 tight ends in Mo Alley-Cox, 6'5", big body, and Woods, another guy that's like 6'7". So I expect a lot of power, smash mouth, football coming out of the Colts. And I think ultimately Jonathan Taylor kind of has to come back is how I look at it. So we already seen one running back and Le'Veon Bell kind of at the top of the world when he kind of pulled the same stunt and just we seen how that ended for him. So I expect Jonathan Taylor maybe to come back and kind of play pissed off in a good way to put it and just earn his money that way and show, hey, y'all don't want to pay me. I'll just show out this year, run this system because it's going to benefit me anyway. So I can see that kind of happen for them. And I think they did go add in the draft Josh Downs and went and got Isaiah McKenzie for the wide receiver room. Yes, that's not big for them. I expect kind of more from maybe Josh Downs than I do Isaiah McKenzie at this point in their careers. So I just think the wide receiver room got a little bit better adding those 2 guys, but I just don't think that's going to be their formula of winning anyway. I see this team be a very maybe New England-esque team and just running the ball, game manager, let the defense kind of win games for them. And that's where in this division, I kind of think other than Jacksonville, these offenses aren't going to be so high power where you're going to have to really score with them. So that's why I kind of believe in the Colts just really bouncing back at this point in their stage and getting an Anthony Richardson. I think it's just going to help them and not have an injury prone Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers. They got a young guy in there that I think is going to turn the offense around. And we're going to at least, if you think we're like I'm thinking, kind of be excited to see what they're going to do with this team, with how they're building it.
Yeah, I know one thing's for certain. Nobody wants to be looking down the barrel of Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor potentially running at you. So
Yeah.
there's a vision there, and I'm excited to see what it ends up being. I'm just a little bit worried early on Anthony Richardson being as raw as he is, but they got to play the games, right?
Yep.
So I'll move on to my first ranked team, and I got Jacksonville. Clear cut number 1. I didn't even really have to think about this one. They put together some awesome play there last year with Dougie Peterson coming over and just kind of revitalizing this entire offense from what it was under Urban Meyer. It was pretty bad. And Trevor Lawrence definitely took that step in my eyes, and he's, only poised to get better. It's kind of hard to think he won't get better after showing so much improvement from year 1 to year 2. And they also got a new receiver in town that could potentially be his number 1 guy in Calvin Ridley. Excellent route runner. He's known across the league for being an excellent route runner, and a lot of people still want to give him his chops. Now, it's hard to know for sure because he's been out of the game for a little while now, but he's definitely an upgrade over some of the players they had, and just pairing him with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, it's only going to make that group better in my eyes. And then defensively, they got some talent here, some early picks that they had invested, and I do think that they'll make something happen here with Josh Allen still being in the fray. And then the number 1 overall pick, Trayvon Walker. What will he do? He's definitely poised to be better than he was. He kind of disappointed a little bit for being such a high pick, but all the potential in the world is there. He's an athletic freak. So, and then Tyson Campbell, who made my top 10 corner list, young emerging player with Andre Cisco as well. They brought in some corners to kind of make the steps a little bit better here, but they got some pieces, and I'm excited to see what they do next year. If there was one concern I did have, is their offensive line, especially with Cam Robinson be suspended for 4 games and having to rely on Walker Little to start at left tackle. I don't know how good he is. He's a young player with injury history, but we'll see. Jacksonville number one for sure.
Yeah, like you said, for sure, pretty clear cut here. I think what it boils down to, and we'll all agree on this, is the offense is just the most projectable and the most firepower in this division. Every other one is just doesn't show much. It's either led by a young QB, or with Tennessee, it's just not a whole lot there as far as weapons and Tannehill QB play. So Trevor Lawrence taking that step last year, showing you what he can do, and really, just you like to see it after the poor start they had to the year, that they never mailed it in and gave up on the division. Doug
Sure.
Peterson really schemed some things up and got Trevor comfortable in that offense. And now you add a Calvin Ridley to it, who's an astonishing route runner and just really, really helps the firepower. And I want to touch a little on their run game as well with ETN, who was phenomenal anytime he touched the ball. Real big home run hitter for them. And then you draft a guy like Tank Bigsby out of Auburn to pair with that. I just think that balances well for the home runs. They had the third most runs over 40 yards last year already. So you pair that explosive play in the run game with the explosive plays that Trevor can make with his arm. That's a lot of points I expect to be scored in Jacksonville this summer. That being said, the defense is no slouch either. They've got proven names. Josh Allen on the defensive side of the ball has always been a stud. Trayvon Walker, I think, is poised to make another step. He got his feet wet, and as the 1-1 of last year's draft, and he knows how to impact the game now, I think. So I'm expecting more big plays from him next year. And then, as you touched, the secondary is a little slept on. Just overall roster construction, much more sound than every other team in this division. And I don't really expect it to be a tight race by season's end. I would expect Jacksonville to be resting some starters, probably week 18.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Definitely think
Yeah, I have Jacksonville at one.
This.
I'm not gonna. Oh, yeah,
You're
I
good.
have them at one. Also, I just kind of think, what y'all said. I'm not gonna beat the drum too hard, but I just think, with Dougie P there another year, we've seen this guy take Nick Foles to a Super Bowl. So I can only imagine what he could do with a guy like Trevor Lawrence. I just expect big things. I expect Trevor Lawrence to honestly break probably every passing record they have in Jacksonville, which is held by, I think, Blake Bortles at this time. So I expect that to go good for him. And they went and got, like I said, a Calvin Ridley. I just expect this offense to easily be top 10, maybe could be a top 5, because they're going to be playing these teams that we just named at least twice. I just expect a big year from them. Travis Etienne can easily do 800 passing and rushing, I think, but they did go draft a kid, so that maybe can take from him a little bit. But I just think Travis Etienne is too big of a player not to be at least on the field at maybe the same time that this kid's coming into. Then other than that, the only thing I'd like to maybe hit on is the corner room, like y'all said, is Darius Williams and Tyson Campbell, a great duo, don't get talked about a lot. And I think it's just because maybe Trevor Lawrence is taking a lot of that sunshine from the team. And then my last thing is just Trayvon Walker has to show up this year to me to kind of be what they drafted him to be. And if not, that's kind of their only maybe letdown this season. But other than that, I expect big things from Jacksonville.
Gotcha. Yeah. Excited for Jacksonville, man. It's been a long time. Well, the first time they've actually had such a bright outlook as a team, just their whole team and their future as going forward. Trevor Lawrence being a franchise quarterback, all that's great. Happy for Jacksonville fans. I'm sure this is different for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of a boring start here with AFC South, just being a division full of rebuilding teams, and then Tennessee being what they are and kind of being lost in the sauce, if you will, not really having a direction, and then a clear-cut number one. Wasn't much there to debate, but Christian's obviously high on the Colts. We'll see what happens there, how that turns out. But the NFC South is a much different story. We got some close battles here between these couple teams. And last year, they finished close to each other. And I think it was Carolina, the Falcons, and Tampa Bay all finished 7-9, and New Orleans finished 8-9, and they won the division.
Tampa Bay was 8-9.
Tampa Bay won 8-9. Tom Brady, of course, yes.
Yeah.
I thought I had that pulled up and ready to go, but apparently I did not. But my fourth-ranked team is Tampa Bay, and I just think they lost Tom Brady. They are, very slim on the offensive line. They were not able to run the ball at all last year. They didn't really do a whole lot to bring in running backs. They brought in Chase Edmonds. They had Keyshawn Vaughn, who's been kind of a disappointment, young player out of Vanderbilt. And they did draft Sean Tucker out of Syracuse this year. But Rashad White leading the way. That's, he's got a passing down skill set too. And then this offensive line struggled last year. They did get Ryan Jensen back, so maybe they can get some more push. And they did draft Cody Mock as well, who is penciled in at right guard to start. So we'll kind of see what this offense looks like. But I do not have very high expectations at all, considering the offense is going to be running through Baker Mayfield more than likely. These receivers are good if they are healthy, and that's another layer to this. Man, it could get real ugly next year for Tampa Bay if Mike Evans and Chris Godwin do not play for whatever reason, because, man, they don't have anything else. It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
And then defensively, they got some pieces here. They did bring back Jamel Dean. They still got Levante David and Devin White. Young players, Logan Hall, and their first-round pick from last year, Kalijah Cansey. So Antoine Winfield. They got players here, some big names for sure, but just in general, I think they need a little bit more in the secondary. And then up front, they're good, but they don't have a lot of depth. And Kalijah Cansey's kind of a tweener player as it is anyway, so it's kind of a weird translation from college to the NFL. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But yeah, I'm not very high on Tampa Bay. I do think they're in for a high pick next year.
Yeah. The NFC side is going to be a lot more differential between all of us, but I would think we're all going to be agreeing on the bottom team here because I have Tampa Bay as well. That being said, if they get a motivated, there's no question he's going to be motivated. Baker, this is his last shot to hold down a job as a starting QB. So if he plays like rookie Baker Mayfield, they've got a chance to do a little something. But that being said, he's shown too many of the inconsistencies, the turnovers, and that's what's killing him right now in training camp as well, from what we're seeing. They don't have the talent to offset that. Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, him alone was enough to get him to a winning record last year. So you can't expect much more from Baker with this group. And I think that boils down to not being able to run the football as poorly as they were last year. The 3.4 yards per carry was the lowest in the league. And I get you want to let Tom kind of operate things at the line and drive your offense, but it's such a tough task to be so one-dimensional on that side of the football. And like you said, just didn't do anything to improve it. It's pretty rough shop on that side of the ball. I would expect a hard time putting up points in Tampa this year if you had to be my guess. And then the defense, there's some good veterans on there, but I'm more excited of the other younger teams' defenses in this division, and that's why I've got them finishing higher than Tampa.
Yeah, I agree with both y'all. Tampa definitely at 4. I just think we seen, just them winning the division and now having to go against, the hardest schedule because they won the division's not going in their favor also, because you have a Baker Mayfield and like that running back room. I'm not that big, and if one wide receiver goes down, you're kind of done for. And the only signing they really had was Ryan Neal to kind of help on the defensive side, but I just think they kind of did what the Rams did, went all in, went and got Tom. This is what they did to themselves. They're kind of going to be like the Rams, kind of what we've seen this past season. Don't expect big things out of them. They're just going to have to go through these tough years and kind of rebuild. But just to hit on a little nugget I have is, Tom was there. The offense was 23rd in points scoring, and then their defense was 18th in points allowed. And, we just said what their offense is looking at like this year. I just expect that kind of to get worse unless you kind of Chase hinted on. Baker kind of comes out of nowhere and be rookie Baker and plays with that fire that we've seen in college. But I wouldn't, bet on that if I was a betting man. So I feel pretty confident Tampa Bay at 4.
Gotcha. Yeah. They're definitely, I think, the only team in this division that's just clear cut. That being said, my third team is the Carolina Panthers. And I'm a little lower, I think, than some are on this team, but I just look at it. I look at the team up and down, and I do think they got pieces across the roster, young players across the roster that are all talented and ready to take a step in their own right. My problem comes in the weapons for Bryce Young. I don't think they're where they need to be. And I think he's being dropped into a situation that's not exactly friendly to his play style and his stature, because this is going to force him to have to create a lot with weapons. His top receiver is probably Adam Thielen. And then you got a Jonathan Mingo, DJ Chark, Terrence Marshall, Laviska Shenault, if you're into that kind of thing. And then Hayden Hurst is a tight end who's a decent player in his own right, but just no star players here. Miles Sanders was a pretty good back when he was in Philly, but I really think that DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny are going to turn that up a notch, in my opinion. I think they're going to be better and show a little bit more explosiveness. So the one thing I can say, they got a pretty solid offensive line in front of them with a young star tackle and Ikem Ekwonu, and then another solid tackle across from Taylor Moton. That's really good. They go up there with some of the better offensive lines in the league as far as the tackle duo. And then on defense, they got players, man. Brian Burns is a star. We all know who that is, Agent Zero. J.C. Horn, young player, merging, as long as he can stay on the field and stay healthy. Derek Brown, they brought in Eric Rowe as a former Dolphin player to help out in the secondary a little bit. C.J. Henderson. So they got some pieces on defense, and I do think that they'll be good, maybe above average, but I'm worried about these weapons, man. That's why I have them at 3.
Yeah, totally fair, Brian. 3, I differed from you. I actually have the Atlanta Falcons here, and I really love the direction they're heading, but to me, this all boils down to QB play. We've talked on our QB rankings podcast about Desmond Ridder, and he just doesn't do much for me. He's, I think, pretty easily the lowest ceiling in this division out of all the QBs. There's not a lot there to be excited about. That being said, if he just takes care of the football and gets the ball to his weapons like Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan and leans on this run game, they get ahead in football games. They can put up points and be a sound team. But I think they're going to get into trouble when they get behind in football games and their teams are forcing Desmond Ridder to beat them over the top and whatnot. That's where they struggled last year. I know it was mostly Mariota for the majority of last season, but they still finished with the second fewest passing yards in football, under 3,000 passing yards. The receivers, they have too many weapons to be that poor in that department, and I don't really see a big jump with the QB they're going to be throwing out there. But I think that, like I said, they drafted well. They got a great O-line, and the defense is headed in the right direction. Love the Jesse Bates signing. I saw him in Cincinnati tear it up for a long time against the Ravens, and he's a heck of a football player, very underrated. And then you partner that with someone on the outside like Terrell. They've got pieces there to make a little noise. But as I said, I just have them finishing 3rd and under the other 2 because of QB play.
Fair enough, I guess. Fair enough.
The number 3, I have the New Orleans Saints. I just think, Alvin Kamara is suspended for 3 games, but they did go get a Jamal Williams. But other than Michael Thomas and Chris Olave, which I don't have that much faith in Michael Thomas playing the whole year. I have to maybe see a whole year out of him at this point in his career. Whew. I think Chris Olave is their shooting star. I think this guy easily could be a top 10 wide receiver if he gets a good quarterback play. And I think that's what New Orleans is hoping happens with a Derek Carr coming in. But I just, as a Chargers fan, I've seen Derek Carr. He had Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is way better than Chris Olave, and we've seen him do great things with the Raiders. But I just think he's a mid quarterback to me at this point in his career. And I just think this defense is just getting older. They have Davis at linebacker, older guy. How much can he keep up this play? I think Cam Jordan, I don't think he's going to take a step down, but if so, that's just going to hurt this team even more. So I just kind of wish, at this point they would tear it down, because I'm tired of them just hugging the salary cap as much as they can and just stay at the top of it and not be able to really do anything else besides adding Derek Carr and Jamal Williams. That's all they could do, because that's all they have the money for. So I think they went and drafted Brian Breezy from Clemson. I think that was a great signing for this aging defensive line that kind of helped them. But I just think these other defenses and what these other 2 teams are doing, I just kind of like that more than what I'm seeing out of the Saints at this point.
Yeah, That's fair, Christian. I definitely can see the Saints kind of falling apart. They have a couple years in the past, just recently, just because they've been hugging the salary cap. Like you said, that kind of puts them in a poor position when they really can't have a lot of depth across their roster. But on paper, their ones look very good. I think that they could be a competitive team next year for sure. It's just, as with every team, you got to stay healthy. And some have a little bit more wiggle room than others. The Saints have zero wiggle room. They got to stay healthy to be competitive because their backups are just not where they need to be. Derek Carr, I think he's a solid starting quarterback. Jameis Winston's a solid backup. But other than that, you ain't got a whole lot of solid depth pieces after that. However, they did bring in Kendre Miller. I do expect him to compete with Jamal Williams, especially with Alvin Kamara being suspended. As far as receiver room, Michael Thomas is, like Christian said, hadn't been really Michael Thomas since like 2019, maybe 2019.
Yeah.
Gosh, it seems like forever ago. And then their offensive line's got some pieces here, some studs. Ryan Ramczyk, one of the best right tackles in football. Aaron McCoy, and then Andrews Pete, who's been a solid player as well, with a young player in Trevor Penning next to him. And then defensively, same story. Some really good top end players: Marshawn Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu, a little bit older, Mario Davis, Cameron Jordan. Just these aging players who still have stuff left in the tank, but you just kind of worry about this team going forward because this is what they got. This is it. This is their ceiling until they kind of break it down and restart. And, I'm not super high on the Saints either, but I do think there's enough here to kind of put them over a young, freshly rebuilding Carolina team. I just think they got some proven players here, particularly in comparison to the Carolina Panthers' weapons.
Yeah, that's fair, Brian. So for the second team in my rankings, I have Carolina, which you had at 3. I'm really, really excited about their defense, and you partner that with my favorite QB in this rookie QB class, Bryce Young. I think there's a lot to be excited about in Carolina. The biggest concern is the wide receiver room, as you mentioned. Like, I have no idea who's getting separation. Bryce Young can be holding that ball for 7 seconds and getting sandwiched a lot, and which is scary given his size, as you mentioned. But I just don't see the receivers getting separation, and that worries me a lot. But the defense is so many dynamic pieces that I think they single handedly can win a lot of games. Like, I want to say Brian Burns is one of my favorite, if not the most underrated pass rusher in football. Heck of a player that really doesn't get shine. J.C. Horn, who we talked on in our top 10 cornerback rankings, he is starting to making all the tools you want from a shutdown corner. Just matter of staying on the field. You bring in the veteran like Justin Houston to help with the pass rush, and the other Jeremy Chin, who don't get a lot of shine. It's a heck of a player. Just so many things to be excited about on that side of the ball. And then I think Bryce Young is talented enough to make at least a little something with pretty much nothing, the way it looks in the wide receiver department. And he kind of showed that at Alabama, even though it's Alabama, like they have players there. It's not the first round wideouts they're used to churning out every year. They didn't have that at Alabama last year, and he still was putting up insane numbers in the Heisman conversation once again. Despite his size, he's just got all the other QB intangibles that you look for in a star QB. So I'm excited about him. I'm really looking forward to watching him play football. And I think the rest of the roster checks out pretty well. But that said, they're still a little young, so I expect a few mental mistakes here and there. And that'll be enough to cost them a division title, in my opinion.
3 weeks, we'll be seeing them take a snap, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Close.
At number 2, I have what I like to call the new Tennessee and the Atlanta Falcons. Since Arthur Smith has got there, he pretty much what he learned at Tennessee, he's brought to Atlanta. And I think maybe for the better. I mean, this offensive line, to me, is maybe a top 5 offensive line. Going to get a Bijan Robinson, which people kind of wasn't big on that pick, but I just think that's what this team was kind of missing. They had a bunch of guys rotating in and out. I think just Robinson has the upside to be what we've seen out of Barkley, Nick Chubb, these all down backs. They're just carrying some of these not good offensive teams, which this team is good offense on paper, just not the quarterback position, kind of what y'all both have said. Just the quarterback's the only thing that's kind of shaky to me, but they went and got J.C. Bates and Campbell at D-tackle, older guy to kind of buffing up the defensive line a little bit. But my big thing is I'd like to see Drake London and Kyle Pitts get more definitely in the picture. Kyle Pitts especially. He has just not been what people expected him to be since he's been in the league. But I just expect this Atlanta team to kind of be what Tennessee has been in the past. Good enough defense on that side. I like their corners. I like A.J. Terrell definitely coming out of Clemson. Big guy on him. But I just think this team's going to be more of just doing kind of what, like I said earlier, New England was and kind of what they still are, just controlling the clock, making teams kind of, and then this defense and this division is going to come down to a defense, honestly. I think I just kind of believe that this offensive line of Robinson is going to let Atlanta win a lot of games, and that's why I got them at 2.
Gotcha. Yeah, Atlanta's my number 1 team. I just wanted to highlight a couple things with Atlanta. One being what you talked about, Christian. Arthur Smith coming over to Atlanta and kind of taking over and kind of just laying the foundation last year, running the football, man. And they were able to run the football very well last year. One of the best in the NFL. I believe they were 3rd in like many of the top end metrics for rushing the football, like yards per carry, efficiency, blocking, and PFF. Like they were near the top in a lot of those categories. And I think a lot of it has to do with the personnel they brought in. They got studs all across their offensive line. And Jake Matthews, who just seems like he just won't stop, man. He's just been doing it for years and years and years and being incredibly consistent. And then Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry, that's an excellent right side of the offensive line. It might be the best right side of the offensive line in all of the NFL. And then you combine that with a young, promising player to Matthew Bergeron, penciled in at left guard, and a couple good weapons here. I do think their receiver depth's a little worrisome under Drake London. Their other 2 guys that are of relevance, Matt Collins and Scotty Miller, are not exactly proven number 2 and number 3 respectively players. And then tight end Kyle Pitts, I'm all in, bro. He's proven himself. People can say he had down last year, but I really blame that more Marcus Mariota just being complete and utter garbage. Sorry. Hopefully Marcus Mariota does not hear this. But yeah, it was pretty bad last year, and I blame more of that than it is on Kyle Pitts, because Kyle Pitts did post 1,000 yards his rookie season. I do think he can be a weapon as soon as he starts getting fed the ball. So all I think it needs is for Desmond Ridder to be competent. Another parallel is going to draw is when he was coming out, my prospect comparison was to Ryan Tannehill. And sure enough, he's in the same scheme that Ryan Tannehill played in and looked good in. He has a similar strengths and weaknesses profile, being a little bit taller guy, having a stronger arm, being maybe a little bit more of a plus athlete comparison to some other pocket passer type quarterbacks. You know, he's no Lamar Jackson or anything like that by no means, but he's got some wiggle to him and some athleticism, more so than your normal quarterback. And then, man, he just has to take what's there. There should be able to run the football great next year. Bijan Robinson should be a star next year. He just has to not make mistakes and get the ball to Kyle Pitts and Drake London off play action, just like what you see in Tennessee with A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, and all of those boys. I think it can be a very similar offense. And then their defense, I think, man, it's definitely taking a step. Last year, their defensive line was just horrendous, man. They couldn't stop the run, and that's been kind of the story of the Falcons last couple of years. The trenches not being where they need to be, offensive and defensive line not being where it needs to be. And they brought in David Onyemata and Calais Campbell to pair with Grady Jarrett, and Grady Jarrett's probably like, whew, finally, about time you guys got me some help here. And so now he can really maybe bring a little bit more to the table, right? Not having to carry the entire defensive line on his plate every single week. And, you know, he's getting those double teams week in and week out. Maybe he can get some one-on-one opportunities. So I'm very high on Atlanta, and I think that they can definitely make a splash next year. but it all boils down to Desmond Ritter not being garbage. So we'll see.
Yeah, and ultimately, I kind of lean he will, so that's why I had them at 3. But I mean, everything else, man, the scheme, like he's set up for success. Really, they've slowly built what they needed to do in Atlanta. So exciting stuff for sure. But I have the Saints finishing first, and that's pretty much boiling down to veterans who've been there, done that, seen every type of football game, played in every type of football game you can play in, and knowing how to win a few of those. That just rising to the top above these younger QBs in this division. They still have players at pretty much every level on each side of the ball to be excited about as well. And I think that, along with some more good fortune and special teams department, they were terrible. The second worst field goal percentage last year, and that boils down to a lot of wins and losses. Will Lutz was not a good kicker last year. If he bounces back, and they just cut out some of the turnovers and stay a little healthier, I think they're solid. As you've talked on, their ones are pretty good names to run out there on the football field. It's when you get those injuries that you get a little bit more worrisome than the other teams, because the depth just is not there, as you touched on. But that said, I trust Derek Carr. I don't think he's by no means a top 10 QB, but I trust him enough to win you football games. And Olave is a heck of a receiver to feed the ball to. And the defense, as I've said, they may be aging, but Cam Jordan and Davis at linebacker, Marshawn Lattimore at corner. You got pieces everywhere. Honey Badger in the secondary. Just talented football team, but I don't think they blow the roof off this division. I'd say they win it with 9, maybe 10 wins. A little bit different than the AFC South, where I think Jacksonville can legitimately flirt with 10, 11, 12 wins because they're a pretty more complete football team. I think New Orleans wins this one off veteran presence and by default beating up the younger teams with a 9-10 win year and sneak into the playoffs and probably get bounced first round.
Yeah, I completely agree, Chase. I do think it's going to be a 9 or 10 win team that takes this division. I definitely don't think a team's running away with this thing, but we'll see for sure. I think it's going to be a couple teams right there, 9-10 wins.
Yeah.
At number 1, I have the Carolina Panthers. Maybe a hot take, but I'm going to say a lot of people don't expect this team to be here. But I just think you've seen with Matt Rule exiting the building, and they actually got a head coach when their defensive coordinator took over the position. They actually started getting wins. I just think it's crazy, that a coach get fired, a new coach come along. It shows a lot that this team the coaching wasn't working. The guy came from college. It just didn't transfer over. And what we've heard this whole offseason and what we've kind of seen that players are saying, this is an all-star coaching staff. And that's kind of what they were missing. And I think the players are there. I understand the wide receiver room's a little scary, but we've seen teams work with less and win with that. So I just expect Bryce Young to kind of be Bryce Young and make things happen and make things work. He has the quick release. I think that's kind of going to be their game plan. And I think Miles Sanders is going to be a key piece of this offense, and that's kind of why they went out and paid him. I think it's not going to be like Christian McCaffrey, but I think he's going to catch a lot out of the backfield, and probably I think his career high in catches like 50-something. I would definitely hammer that he's going over 50 catches in this offense. He's going to have to for them to be successful. I just think, like I've been saying about all these teams, this team's going to come down, or this division is going to come down to the team with the best defense, and I just lean the Carolina Panthers. They have the J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin, Brian Burns, Shaq Mason, Samuel, Derek Brown. I just love this defense. There's a star on each level. That's just not a lot of teams just doesn't have that, and the Panthers do. So I just think one of these wide receivers are going to shine. They're going to have to. I would maybe lean towards maybe a DJ Shark finally coming, or maybe a Jonathan Mingo, just because we hadn't seen him on the NFL field. He may can surprise some people, but I just expect great things out of the defense, and that's why I have them winning this division. I just think it's going to be a lot of turnovers that they're going to create in Carolina.
Nice. Exciting, man. Exciting. So Christian, high on Carolina and high on the Colts, man. You like these rookie quarterbacks?
I mean, just what I see in that divisions and versus the other quarterbacks, I expect rookie quarterbacks we've seen kind of get thrown in now, and it's kind of like with these wide receivers, they just pick up quick and run with it.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yep.
Colts wasted no time. They've already announced Anthony Richardson as their starter. Bryce Young's gotten all the first team reps. Teams aren't waiting around anymore. These guys are pretty well coached in college to surface them for the NFL football. Of course, the game's going to speed up. It always does on these players, but um, season's so long, you take those lumps and you learn. And in these divisions, you can afford that really. So a lot to be excited about. I'm with Christian. I love the direction both of these franchises are headed.
Yeah, I do too. So if you had to pick one team of the AFC and NFC South who you thought had the brightest direction moving forward, which team would you pick?
I got
You only got
Carolina.
one.
I got Carolina. Despite Bryce Young's size, I love the defense. In love with the defense, as Christian's touched on. And Bryce Young's my favorite rookie QB. I think all he needs is weapons. One dynamic, a DJ Moore esque receiver. But I mean, you had to give him up to get Bryce Young, which I understand. But they get one of those guys for him. I think they're set for a pretty good amount of time.
I hear you, man. What about you, Christian?
If I had to pick one, man, it's going to hurt for me to say it, but it's definitely Jacksonville.
Ooh.
I mean, I seen my team in the playoffs do what they did and we choked it. I mean, that's plain and simple what we did. And I just expect Trevor Lawrence to be getting better and better each year. I maybe said this in the pod, but like we said, we recorded it so many times. But I think Trevor Lawrence is the Andrew Luck. I mean, that's really what he is. He's going to take over that franchise, and I don't expect him to retire like Andrew Luck did to put the Colts where they are now. But I just expect Jacksonville to only get better, and they actually have a coach that's going to coach, and they're just getting better each year. I mean, they add weapons. They went and got a Calvin Ridley this year, so I just expect them to go add maybe pieces on defense at this point because that offense is, like I said, I expect top 5, top 10 definitely out of that offense. So I just think they keep adding to this defense, and Jacksonville is going to be owning that division for a while.
Fair enough. Yeah, Jacksonville is definitely worthy of that. I was going to highlight Houston here just because I like what D'Amico Ryans is doing with the defense. I think they could build something similar to what they have in San Francisco. And you guys know I'm a CJ Stroud guy. I believe in him. And also, I'm just excited to see what this offense looks like. I think they'll be able to run the rock and have a good defense, and that's always a good thing. But Jacksonville for sure, and definitely if you're in on Bryce Young, you should be all in on the Panthers because that defense has been ready for a while now. So, yeah, anything else we want to touch on?
Yeah. I just want to add quickly. We all know this is our third time recording this pod. Anyone listening, guys, we appreciate you hanging with us, man. We are fighting the technology. I'm sure some of you know how difficult this can be at times, but we are, man, and we're looking to build this momentum heading into football season. So everyone's excited. So anyone that's been listening, if you come across our stuff on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, any of that, like, comment, share, subscribe, tell a friend. We're for all of that, and we appreciate all of it. And I just want to thank everyone for hanging with us here, man. And I'm glad we finally got this one done.
Amen.
I'm with you guys there too. Third time's a charm, right?
Yes, sir.
Hey, yeah, thanks.
Well, I think that concludes today's pod on the AFC and NFC South division rankings. I hope everyone enjoyed. Thursday, we'll be releasing the AFC and NFC West division rankings. So be sure to tune in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.
Peace.